The UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has identified the reduction of illicit financial flows, or IFFs as they are known, as a priority for building peaceful societies around the globe.
Countries have got a responsibility to manage their development and bring it about. And to do this, they require resources. They require resources that they generate within the countries, but also resources that they can get from outside. But to be able to effectively get resources from outside, they have to demonstrate that actually they have utilized all possible means within each country, and the resources are not enough for them to meet their development needs. So it is important for countries to exhaust all ways of getting resources domestically before they can go outside to look for resources.
2030 focuses on illicit financial flows and their importance on the developing continent, largely because they drain resources from African countries. They drain capital, they drain tax revenues, and as a result, there's very little funding available to promote socioeconomic development and transform economies through infrastructure investment. So it's not surprising then that the 2030 Development Agenda focuses on illicit financial flows, largely because it's trying to prevent the bleeding in developing countries and on the African continent specifically, but more importantly, try and prevent the reliance on overseas development assistance so that countries can actually focus on building their economies with their own resources.
That is why Target 16.4 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals aims to, by 2030, significantly reduce illicit financial flows and arms flows, strengthen the recovery and return of stolen assets, and combat all forms of organized crime. Indicators 16.4.1 calls for the measurement of the total value of what is known as illicit financial flows, or IFFs.
Because of IFFs damaging the governance systems within the countries, it is important for countries to engage in this exercise, which also gives them a spillover effect that as they are generating resources, they are also strengthening their governance systems, and in so doing, they are having a stronger economy.
In order to curb or to manage or reduce the illicit financial flows, one needs, first of all, to know them, to know the key sources of them, but also to measure them.
It's important to keep in mind, however, that it's very difficult to measure IFFs due to the clandestine nature of the crime.
Illicit financial flows are a very complex and sometimes controversial topic because there are different, it's a term, it's a concept that is used in different policy areas. So what we did was to take a comprehensive view on this concept, whether it was related to tax evasion, commercial practices, or criminal activities, or corruption, and so on, and try to identify a concept that can be used for statistical purposes.
Target 16.4.1 is overseen by two United Nations custodians, UNODC, leading the work on crime-related IFFs, and UNCTAD, responsible for developing methods to measure IFFs related to taxes and trade.
In January 2018, UNCTAD and UNODC decided to form an international task force on the statistical measurement of IFFs to work out the statistical definitions and methods. And as a result, we developed a conceptual framework for the statistical measurement of IFFs.
What is meant, what has been developed as definition it relates to financial transfers that happens cross-border that have something illicit. That the illicit component can be related to the origin of these funds because they were earned illicitly, or the way they were transferred, or even the way they are going to be used.
As of 2020, IFFs are now formally defined for statistical purposes as financial flows that are illicit in origin, transfer, or use, that reflect an exchange of value, and that cross country borders. By that definition, a flow of value is considered illicit if it is illicitly generated, for instance as a result of criminal activity or tax evasion, or if it is illicitly transferred, as in when it violates currency controls, or if it is put to illicit use to finance terrorism, for example. Some flows that are not strictly legal may still fall within the statistical definition of IFFs, like for instance, cross-border aggressive tax avoidance, which erodes the tax base of the country where that income was generated.
Illegal is also illicit, but there can be a number of activities and practices that can be formally legal, but still many people would consider them as illicit from, for example, from a moral, ethical perspective. So, for example, there are some tax practices that that can be formally legal, forms of tax avoidance that can be still legal, but still very much disputable from an ethical point of view. And this, we know that there is an ongoing discussion on this.
The second point of definition, exchange of value, expands the definition to comprise more than purely financial transfers. Exchange of value also includes the exchange of goods and services and financial and non-financial assets. And illicit financial flows must, by definition, also cross borders. And this also includes transferring ownership of assets from a resident of a country to a non-resident, even if the actual assets remain in the same jurisdiction.
The Conceptual Framework reflects concepts and standards approved by the Interagency and Expert Group on SDG Indicators and the United Nations Statistical Commission, and has been endorsed for global use by all countries.
The consequences of IFFs are severe, and successful measures to curb IFFs could help countries to redirect resources to sustainable development and to social and environmental concerns in each country.
The main objective of the project is to contribute strengthening statistical capacities of national agencies in pilot countries to measure certain types of illicit financial flows in order to report on the Agenda 2030 for sustainable development and support policy actions to curb IFF in the pilot countries.
To join the global statistical move to measure illicit financial flows, visit stats.unctad.org/IFFs or UNODC.org.